On a Sunday, January 24th, when it was January 24th, 1956, when the public presentation of the PNM was done. Mr. Ashton Forde, you are the General Secretary. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
It is great to see you, and you look good after all these years.
Well,
It's working. Whatever it is, you must share it with me.
good life, good family life.
Good family life.
Good
All
life.
right. So I will be taking that and taking a note of it on the side. It is the 60th anniversary of the PNM. The Prime Minister, who was the premier and the founder of the People's National Movement, when he launched it in '56, said that the aspirations of the party is to bring the nation together from a racial standpoint, a collective sense of being. I love something he said before the famous "I put my bucket down." He said, "We have the opportunity to either lift people or push them down in the ditch." He said, "We are not qualified to push them in the ditch, which means we are going to lift them." And it was there that the Prime Minister, the father of our nation, said that I lay my bucket down here. Speak to me 60 years later looking back. You had a number of people coming out from that initial PNM that became Prime Ministers. You had a lot of young MPs and so on. Let's talk about the PNM 60 years later. What a synopsis of 60 years in your view, sir?
Well, I believe that when Dr. Williams launched the party in 1956, he called it a national movement which embraced all the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And between 1956 to now, you would see that we have indeed achieved that. Not maybe 100%, but to a great extent, we have achieved it. In 1956, the first executive of the party comprised Larry Constantine.
Yes.
Yeah, at that time, Larry went on to be an outstanding sportsman and Baron of Maraval and so on. The vice chairman was a guy, Dr. Mohisib, an East Indian guy from South. And the general secretary was Donald Granado. And the assistant secretary was Kamaluddin Mohammed.
Yes.
The treasurer was a guy called Ulrich Lee. And from that composition, you would see the mixture of Trinidad and Tobago. We have always strived to have the face of Trinidad and Tobago whenever we present our team as an executive of the party and also a team in Parliament.
It is that whole question of diversity and inclusion that saw Isabel Ursula Tichet, who was the lady vice chairman at the time.
Later on, she became she was the first chairman of the Women's League. Now, this is very important for me to make this point, that in the constitution of the party, what Dr. Williams did was to ensure that a woman sit on the leadership of the party, so that he had the chairman, the vice chairman, and the lady vice chairman, so that you must have a woman on the leadership of the party.
Yes.
And not few political parties enshrine in their constitution guaranteeing that women is present. So just recently, we had Mr. Khan as chairman of the party. Camille Robinson Regis was vice chairman. And you had Donna Cox as lady vice chairman. So you could have a lady as chairman, that Linda Babulal as chairman at one time. So the point, however, is that if all the men dominate all the other posts, there must be a woman in it. And that is the significance of the PNM attaching great importance on the role of the woman in the PNM and the development of Trinidad and Tobago.
60 years later, not only is it a case of having sexes accurately represented, but you also had a situation because you're looking at Trinidad and Tobago, and even though there may be a whole different talk show for Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson, he at the time was the treasurer also.
Yes, that is afterwards, because remember in 1956, he fought the Tobago seat, and that time that it was one seat in Tobago for Parliament, and he was beaten by Pt. James in 1956. But in 1961, he won the seat when Dr. Williams played a personal interest in the Tobago campaign, and he became the member of Parliament for Tobago, and then treasurer of the party.
One of the amazing things is when you look at, and it has been said many times, it is not only the soldiers who are up front, but there were many other soldiers who were involved. What is it? The party started with about 50 people, 50, and then it expanded. What was it? They took about $1,000 from everybody.
Yeah.
It's the beginning, and the name that was involved there was Hugh Wooding.
Yes, and a lot of people did not accept political office when the party was formed. People like Ferdy Ferrer, Ivan Williams, Owen Mer, and Nicholas Simonet, they did not, but they were in the background of the party, working to bring the party to the fore. And you will recall, in the 61 general election, because in 56 we won by one seat, that is in La Brea, the seat. You know,
I think Albert Gomes referred to him as the little man then, and then he realized later on who is the bigger man.
Right.
But go ahead, I
we had Ronnie Williams, we had Alfredo Bermudez, we had Jack DeLima, we had a mixture of people. So we had the Chinese, the businessmen, all different people coming into the party, and we won every election after that, because in 1961 election, the DLP had a big rally in the Savannah, and everybody thought because they would have won that election, because before that we lost the federal election, and they say, well, the PNM only survived because it was a fluke winning in 56. Well, in the Savannah, the then leader Capildeo exhorted his followers, arm yourself.
Dr. Capildeo of the Democratic Labour Party.
And that was the end of it. That was the end of it. And Dr. Williams won all the elections after. In 1971, is another historical part in the party, because it came after the 1970 disturbances.
Yes.
And A.N.R. Robinson had left the PNM, and they formed the Democratic Action Committee, and it had the ACDC, DLP, and so on. And at the last moment, he said he's not contesting the elections unless they've changed the voting machine. And he boycotted the election, called for a boycott, and succeeded, because 28% came out. PNM won 8 seats unopposed. And Williams, the PNM under Dr. Williams, won all 36 seats. It is there when he addressed us in the Youth League, he told us that this is a dangerous situation for the country. And if one day somebody who is not right in their mind become prime minister and control the government like that, they could do anything. Because at those days, the prime minister did all the appointments. So they went into the constitutional reform, and we had the Republican
Constitution, yes.
and gave the powers that the prime minister normally had, give it to the office of the president. He always referred to it as the office of the president. In other words, he was creating an institution, and it is different from a political appointment. And this institution would appoint independent commissions, whereas in the past it was the prime minister would have appointed them. So, and that independent office of the president would have been the buffer between the people and the government.
The voice you're hearing is that of the General Secretary of the People's National Movement. He is Ashton Forde, graced us this morning because of the 60th anniversary, the PNM being launched on January 24th, 1956, talking about that inclusionary attitude of Dr. Williams. There are two outstanding things. One is just a mention that's important. You were coming out of a failed federation, and still the doctor took the time to take the PNM manifesto, as it were, at that time, sent it to Michael Manley, and he said, take a look at this for me. Manley sent it back. He was pleased with that, and the PNM was launched, as we said, on January 24th. I'm struck by, he said, we are not just a party in the narrow sense of the word. We are rather a rally, a convention of all, a mobilization of all the forces in the community, cutting across race and religion, class and color. Talk to me 60 years later. How have we been able to work this nation into that collective body? Because for the most part, folks who are seeing it now get the feeling that we have not been as separated as we are in this day. Just a reflection on the area of race itself. The cohesiveness that existed back then with Sham and Kamaluddin Muhammad and so on, and many other people, you don't see it happening now. Give me your reflection on that.
Well, they always try to accuse the PNM of being an Afrocentric party or whatever. But we made every effort to disabuse the minds of the people in that regard. Take, for example, in 1976, in the situation in Rennie. It would have been cheaper to import sugar. But Dr. Williams said in the interest of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, he did not see them as East Indians or anything of the sort, and to save their jobs. And Rennie was established. And then education, scholarships. It was not designed for PNM people alone. It was for all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And as recent as the last Parliament before the 2010, some of the members who were sitting in opposition, their children were on the scholarship list. So therefore, they cannot accuse in PNN anyway about discrimination. But it is always a tool or a strategy that is they try to use. And even now, because when we were to establish the Caribbean Court of Justice, it was on the signature of Basdio Pandey. The country took that decision. We followed it up. We agreed. But they did not support it when they went into opposition. And the last Prime Minister, she made an unfortunate statement and saying the reason they're not supporting it is because there are no East Indian judges. So we cannot be put in that category because we have always governed for all the people.
The question of a welfare state is something that we hear people throwing about all the time. But I really just want to celebrate what the PNM has done in 60 years. But that is one of the things you hear, that in fact folks feel that once you say the PNM, you are in fact giving a welfare state legitimacy because the PNM always did handouts. How do you respond to that?
No. What they look at is all the programs like OJT and Civilian Conservation Corps and a host of others in every category, in agriculture and so on. And what we did was to cater for the young people that may not be academic and may not be academically inclined, but they can contribute. And so these programs were set up, geared towards bringing them out. And there are a number of young people now who went through the OJT system and Civilian Conservation Corps, who are doing fair and well now in high positions in several parts of Trinidad and Tobago, in the state company, in government as a whole.
I'm very happy that you pointed that out, because it's very important to point out that folks don't ever blow the trumpet for the achievements. They only speak of this welfare state in pejorative terms to suit their agenda.
Yeah. And then again, the URP was by several names, but at the end of the day, it is URP, catered for temporary jobs for people, particularly to reform people who may have been incarcerated for one reason or the other, and to put them back into society and so on. But if it has been abused, and Dr. Rowley and his government now will be addressing that.
We will be speeding into Dr. Rowley shortly, but you have to go with the foundation, and I just want to say this just for a moment, because Dr. Williams, in presenting the PNM in 56, made very clear that this country has made me all that I am and can be. He was very thankful for the country giving him the elementary into higher education and everything, and it is under with that sort of backdrop that he went about the education, the educating of the nation. Speak to the achievements of the PNM in the educational context.
Well, in 1965, the Education Act was changed, and where it is compulsory for children to be in school and so on. And Dr. Williams put a lot of emphasis on education, and to the extent that from primary school, children were able to graduate into secondary school, open up the secondary school for all. And that started what we culminating now with the GATE, where from tertiary from nursery to tertiary is one of the PNM's biggest achievement in this country today.